Hi there, and welcome to Open Class number 95, in which we'll go over a couple of messages. Hope you'll find a lot of value here. As always, nothing here is a medical advice, just general thoughts and comments that I hope will bring a lot of value to everyone in the community. So with that said, let us jump right in and actually start with a message from Sierra. So Sierra, as you remember from a very recent Open Class, I think it was maybe 94, had a speed bump, like one of these times where she'd been doing well for actually a long period of time, but kind of the hyperarousal came back, anxiety came back, and she struggled some. And this is for Sierra, this is to share with everyone really, but also with John, who's I think is in a similar spot right now. So I hope this will help you, John, and everyone else that is tuning in. So let's read this. Sierra says, "Hi, Coach Daniel. I've been feeling a lot better lately, so I'm really happy to let you know how much you've helped me even during this speed bump." Anytime, Sierra. So nice to read this. I feel like I've had a revelation or awakening in these past few days that I wanted to share with you. It's mostly about how I know, but really believe that nothing happens to us when we have a few nights of not so great sleep. You say the rules are there. You say the rules are that there are no rules. What really matters is how you feel when you get up. Some people sleep a few hours or take a power nap for 30 minutes and they're able to function just fine. This really takes the pressure off trying to get that perfect 6 to 8 hours. What also really helped me was watching your video with Alexei Guze, who debunks a lot of those facts that were presented by that book that a lot of articles went and ran with, thus creating a world of further sleep anxiety. This is the book called Why We Sleep, which is riddled with a lot of errors. Just hearing him say that, and you say, what matters most is how you feel, because there's no perfect sleep really, that woke something up inside me. That pressure was released, and I didn't feel so anxious to get what we've been taught is perfect. I feel like this is what you've been trying to say, but it's up to us to really accept it. It's how I feel in the morning. I call it, I can still function. I still have a great day. It feels good to know that it's really not one size fits all. Those facts, quote unquote, aren't applicable for every single human being on earth because everyone is different. Every situation is different. Things happen. This is not something you can measure and then say, yep, this applies to everyone. What truly matters is how you feel and trusting that our bodies know what to do. When hyperarousal is down, the body and brain knows it's sleepy time, but it's not something you can force, and that's okay. I know I'm still in my process, but getting to this point of acceptance is liberating. That pressure feels like it really has been lifted. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you, SCR, for sharing this. And it is so true. You know, we are all so very different. There is no ideal whatsoever. Some people have super, quote unquote, erratic sleep patterns. They sleep, a little bit here, a little bit there. Some people spend all day in bed and they feel just fine, etc. There's no ideal in any way. And, for someone who hears this and says, well, it's different. I feel really like I'm hurting. I'm nauseous. I'm anxious. I have this deep hurdles. I don't know who I am. I have memory loss. My body's twitching. I don't feel good. Well, then, there's a lot of hyperarousal there, a lot of anxiety there. Clearly, that's something, that goes away when you learn and understand. But Sierra brings up this super important point of there is no ideal when it comes to number of hours slept. If you sleep just a little bit and you feel okay, if you sleep longer and feel okay, etc., it doesn't matter. And when you're not trying to achieve any number, just let that be. And that's when magic happens. So Sierra, thanks so much for sharing this. John, I hope there was some message of hope here for you and anyone else that is struggling in any way, shape, or form. So let's jump to our next question here, which is from Bibita. She says, Daniel, I'm aware that I need to delegate my sleep. And for those of you who haven't tuned in lately, delegate is when you're sort of you're not trying to sleep. You're delegating that to your brain, if you will, like your personal assistant. You take care of sleep. I'm not going to do anything. You delegate that work. Sleep happens. Now, continuing the message here, trying to delegate my sleep without sleeping pills makes the situation much worse. I keep wondering, how do I delegate my sleep? I keep wondering, how do I stop being anxious about sleep? I know being anxious will not help, but I don't know how to stop being anxious. I believe I have got so much of sleep-related education from your videos, but still, I don't know how to apply them. Please advise me. Daniel, this is the continuation of my previous message. I tried very hard, but I'm not being able to accept that my insomnia is completely psychological. I am not being able to accept that I need to befriend wakefulness. I'm not being able to accept that sleep can happen without pills. I basically have so much education, but not being able to accept and commit to behaviors that will improve my insomnia. Bibita, I think this is a very, very important message. And it's a message of like, I understand so much, but I just can't do it. I can't be on the path. Like, what's wrong? And so, I guess we'll start with the delegation here. And the thing is that when you are taking a sleeping pill, you are delegating. When you take a sleeping pill and then you sleep, it seems like, the chemicals inside the pill were what made you sleep, but it's really the delegation. It's really when you take something and you think, oh, good, it's taken care of. I don't need to do anything. Then you've delegated, right? So if in a way, when you are taking a sleeping pill, you are delegating to yourself, actually, because the pill isn't doing anything. So you just think you're delegating to the pill, but you're really delegating to yourself. So it doesn't matter if someone takes the medication or not. If someone takes the medication and they sleep well, it can help to know that the medication wasn't the thing that made you sleep, but you're still delegating. In the act of like not trying to sleep, you are delegating. Now the question becomes like the question of like, how do I stop anxiety? How do I see that it's psychological? How do I delegate? It's all the same question. It's all the question of how do I change my thoughts, which is another way of saying, how do I control my thoughts, which is impossible. No human who's ever lived has been able to do that. It's not something you can be able to do. And this is the tricky part. So we can use the example of anxiety, and because this is such a common one. So emotions, how we feel, they come from how we think. If you think about like a little teddy bear, then that makes you feel sort of nice inside, warm inside. If you think about a snake, you probably feel a little anxious. It's just a kind of quick proof of concept that how we feel comes from how we think. So when you are, when you want to be at a place where you're not as anxious, that comes from, looking at how we think. It's all about thoughts. So now we can take, we can learn from this that, okay, anxiety comes from warning thoughts, warning signals from the brain. There's something the brain is afraid of. In case of insomnia, it's afraid of being awake at night, and it sends these warning thoughts like, you have to delegate. Why can't you delegate? Why haven't you delegated? Why can't you believe it's psychological? Why don't you see that it's psychological? Why can't you do this? Why can't you do this? What is wrong with you? What if this happens? Those are all kind of the warning thoughts, warning, that makes you feel anxious. And the tricky thing here is that when you want to stop this, I want to delegate, I want to accept, I want to see that it's psychological, I want that, but it's not letting me. It's that the conflict, you see, it's like the brain is trying to tell you something and you're trying to force something else on the brain. And then like this kind of like this conflict, which creates so much friction and frustration and self-blame and self-criticism and all that kind of stuff. So the key here is, to listen instead of trying to convince, to be gentle instead of being pushy, to go towards peace instead of battle, and the path, like to reach a place of peace or to be in a place of peace, the means to be there have to be peaceful. We can't fight ourselves to a place of peace. So how do you do that? Well, I think there are two practical ways that I find very helpful. And one is to take some time every day to listen to the brain. And so you sit down with a piece of paper, perhaps you say, I'm going to do this for 10 minutes every day at 5 o'clock. And then you listen. So if the brain says like, it says, for example, like, why can't I delegate? Then I say, okay, you're asking me, well, why can't I delegate? You can write that down. Why am I so anxious? Like the brain is telling this, and just no intent, but to listen, to show the brain that you are listening to it. It doesn't have to bombard you. It doesn't have to tell you things over and over again. You're listening. And it seems like, well, I'm not doing anything. That's kind of the point. You want to do stuff. You want to stop anxiety. You want to change your thoughts. And that's why they're sticky. So when you're just like taking time to listen to the brain once a day, showing that you're there, you're hearing what it's saying, you're hearing what's warning about, you're not doing anything in particular other than that, that is a really nice and gentle path towards no more struggle. So the other one is to go there in your mind. It's like, that's a trickier one. It's more anxiety provoking in itself, but it's when the brain says, what if this, like, what if you can't delegate? Then you go there in your mind, like, okay, I'm going to imagine a place where I don't delegate and I struggle with sleep for some time, and just like whatever it is that the brain is warning you about, you just imagine that. It's kind of scary, but when you're willing to imagine what the brain is warning you about, then it sees like, oh, she's really paying attention here, and I don't need to keep warning her. So those were some broad thoughts. Bibita, I hope that was helpful. We have Marcika here saying, great advice as always. Thank you so much. Just trying my best. All right, so we will move on to a question from Katie. Let's read this. Katie says, hi, Daniel. Hope you're well. I am, thank you. My journey with insomnia started in August 2020, the week before I left for university, but it subsided after that week, and I thought nothing else of it. Then fast forward to January 2021, where I had yet another bout of insomnia. However, this time I kept thinking about sleep all day and would be so anxious about it. I started an online CBTi sleep course, and my insomnia went away after 2 weeks. So I stopped the course. I was fine for another month, and then I had one sleepless night and lost all progress. Now I feel anxious about sleep all day, and even more as it gets closer to bedtime. I find it hard to get to sleep, and I've gone timeless already, but I still feel anxious and tired in the day. I get up at the same time every morning. I walk to the gym to exercise. I'm not sure if the CBTi course was any good or not, because looking back, I relied upon tracking sleep, which may have been even more of a trigger. I know that you need to accept and befriend wakefulness, and that is just hyperarousal. But as the night goes on, I find it harder and harder to reassure myself and not just panic. I also get scared that I will have this forever. Any tips helps would be great. Katie, I think the first thing I want to say before it slips my mind is pretty much every single client I've ever worked with has wondered if they will have it forever. Everyone thinks, pretty much everyone is wondering, like, how long will this go on? Will I have this forever? Am I a hopeless case? Like, my case is really severe. But it isn't. It's all the same, and it's not complicated. And I'm so glad you're here because what you describe here is, every story has a little bit of different flavors, but it's really the same story. So here's the thing. This is such a classic one, by the way, when you had one episode of some trouble sleep in 2020, and it kind of just went away. And that seems like it could actually, many humans probably have that, and they never have trouble sleeping ever again. That can certainly happen. But what often happens is that you have this one sleepless night, which is completely normal. All humans have that. But you still remember that. You still remember that night, which means that the brain took note, which means that the brain started to look at being awake at night as a potential threat, okay? But then it didn't happen again, good. But it was still there, right? It was still on the radar. The kind of safety mechanism in the brain was still kind of primed. Then you go to university in 2021, and there's more stress. And this time, the brain has already been primed. So this time when you're awake at night more than you thought you would, it's kind of like, this is it. I warned you about this. It's going to come again. Being awake at night is a threat. It is a problem. You got to do. And now it becomes more sticky. And then the more you try to fight off the threat, maybe you try some melatonin, sleep-time tea, curtains, avoiding screens, all that stuff. Then the brain is like, oh yeah, none of this helps. None of this makes you sleep, which it can't. That's impossible. But trying to escape the threat is something we often do. And then it seems like there is a threat, and then things become worse. And then it comes to CBT. CBT is like the gold standard. It's pretty simple. You just spend less time in bed, get out of bed when you can't sleep, et cetera, and you start sleeping better. But the tricky thing is that you don't really see that the reason you sleep better is that you have faith in the techniques and that you believe that will work. And the tricky thing is that it seems like, doing these techniques is what helped. Now I got the techniques down, and then you kind of abandon. After 2 weeks, you're like, good, I'm done. But you haven't understood. You haven't really understood. And then, of course, it's still there. Like, the brain is still thinking that there's a threat. It still thinks that there's some potential problem coming up. And then the next time there's a threat, now it's like all back. Like, oh my gosh, all the things I did doesn't work. I can't control it. So this is just a classic story of escapism. Like you do all these things to escape and you can feel safe for a little while, but you haven't fully understood that there's nothing to escape from. There is no threat. And when you're there, when you see that there is absolutely no threat, there is no problem, there's no harm, there's no danger, that's liberation. That's when you're free and, nothing will bother you again. So with that said, that was kind of just a little riff on that. And now getting more practical, what are there any specific questions? I'm thinking, yeah, Katie, I think when CBTi is very problematic, when it makes you track, that is very true. I get up the same time every morning and walk to the gym and exercise. If you enjoy that, that's great. But know that going to the gym and exercising for the purpose of kind of making yourself tired and sleepy, it's a sleep effort. It's another way to try to escape being awake at night, which makes things more tricky. I think not keeping track of time is helpful. Again, everything can become an effort, but generally speaking, it's great to not know what time it is at night. It's a way to back off from trying to control something we cannot control. I think that's really helpful. The other thing was this one. Yeah, I find it harder and harder to reassure myself. And this just in this line, we can already tell exactly what's happening. So this is what we talked about with the Bibita just before here. The brain is trying to warn you often, right? That's when you're not reassured, means like you're a bit anxious. That's the warning thoughts from the brain, right? It's kind of, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if this happens, right? It's trying to keep you safe by warning you, right? And then when you're trying to reassure yourself, you're fighting back. You're like, I don't want to listen. That's not going to happen. And then the brain goes, what if this happens? Then you're like, it's not going to happen. What if this happens? It's not going to happen. But what if it happens? It's not going to happen. What if it happens? You don't see my point? Is the more you try to reassure yourself, the more the brain thinks you're just not willing to listen. And it really pushes down on that. So it's completely normal that when you try to stop thoughts, they become more strong, if you will. So the trick is to go the other way around, to just be willing to hear the thoughts. Okay, the brain's warning me about this. Then I say, okay, I hear what you're saying, brain. I'm going to write it down. I hear what you're saying, brain. I'm going to imagine it. That is a very nice path. So I think for Katie here, I think hopefully this understanding will be really helpful. And I think just spend some more time here learning, and you'll do really, really well. You have a very clear thought pattern, and your story's so typical. So let's see here. We have some live questions from Marcika. When I had insomnia, two things worked well. First one was I started to not care. This helped me on the long run. I sleep 8 to 10 hours easily. But in the short term, it worked well was when I had a good night, a good sleep. On the next day, if things came back again, I just simply recall the feeling, things of the good night, smells, sounds, and it worked. It seemed I tricked my brain, and it felt we were having a good time again. Also, it's very interesting. I used my Apple Watch to track my sleep. I didn't sleep well, but I took it off before bedtime. I felt freedom. The pressure was off immediately. I think Katie's here live with us. Thanks so much. Anytime, Katie. I'm so glad you tuned in. And timely here we see that Marcika said when you took off the Apple Watch to track your sleep, it felt the pressure was off immediately. So helpful. And what Marcika shares here was that when she had nights when she didn't sleep well, she kind of just remember the nights when she slept well. And as long as that's not like a trick to kind of make yourself sleep again, you just truly kind of remind yourself that there's nothing wrong with me. I sleep well without doing anything particular. Super helpful. And I just want to spend some more time on this one. Marcika says, the first one was I started not to care. This is the truth. This is it. This is the thing, that when you're not thinking about sleep and you're not caring, as quote unquote, then sleep happens so easily. But most people who hear this will go like, how do I not care? I have this huge problem, and how do I not care? And the reality is that it's not like Marcika necessarily doesn't care, meaning Marcika, just like myself and any other human, we all would like to sleep well. We all care in that sense. But it's what I call becoming less attached, or even natto, like non-attached to the outcome, not attached to the outcome, which is like you can take baby steps towards that. But I just want to point out that not caring doesn't mean to not care. It means to be less attached, to be like, if I don't sleep this amount of time, that's okay. If I'm up quite a bit at night, well, that's going to be okay. To go more towards that willingness, towards accepting a little bit more step by step, and then eventually you'll feel like you don't care. You just still care, but you're just not so attached. It's either way is okay. If you sleep this much or this a little, this both are okay. That's what not caring really means, in my humble opinion. BFT says, oh, BFT is here today too. Acceptance is the key, 100%. And Marcika says exactly. And Michael's here too. Yes, Marcika, I ran into the same things with one of those rings. After 2 weeks, I got rid of it and it helped. Yeah, 100%. Marcika says, I think the insomnia gets its endless fuel if someone makes sleep a ritual. Absolutely. Katie says, if I stop dismissing the thoughts, will I not just go down the rabbit hole of bad thoughts? That's a very important question. Very important question. You know, when you have a thought that is kind of like fleeting, let's say you have a thought that you think, I can't sleep without melatonin. And then you're like, wait a minute, that's not true. I've slept my whole life without melatonin. And then that initial thought kind of just goes away. Then it was fleeting. You can kind of just dismiss it. It's kind of like a little nuisance, but it's no problem. You can dismiss those. But when you have more sticky thoughts, when you think, I can't sleep without melatonin, and you're like, that's not true. And it's like, but it's true. And then the brain kind of goes back at you, and you're like, you're trying to dismiss it, but it becomes more and more sticky. Then you see like, oh, this is not a kind of easily dismissible thought. This is a belief that's more rooted in my brain. The brain really thinks it needs to warn me about something here. Then you can't dismiss it. Trying to dismiss that is going to make it more and more and more and more entrenched. When it's a sticky thought like that, and more of a stronger belief like that, that's when there's no really other path but to listen. You know, I really don't think, I think you just have to listen to the brain, showing it that you're there, and that's the way. So it weirdly, when you think that if I don't stop a bad thought, I will go down the rabbit hole. I have to stop this thought or I go down the rabbit hole. But it's the opposite. It's when you're trying to stop it that you go down the rabbit hole. When you're showing the brain that I'm not trying to stop this negative thought, I'm okay with this negative thought, then things become really, really peaceful. BFT says, acceptance is hard, but eventually it levels out and pays off. And I remember BFT struggled for quite a bit, so it means a lot to hear this from you. Very well. Let's keep going here. This is from my namesake. Daniel says, he says, let's read this. After getting through COVID, I developed severe insomnia. I haven't been able to sleep for more than 30 minutes a night for 4 days. Will sleep restriction therapy work for me? And, you know, I could talk so much about this, but I'll just say the following, that, you know, a lot of people have had COVID, and a lot of people sleep just fine after that, right? So it's not the COVID itself, it's the stress that happens when you get any type of health scare. The stress happens, then you start sleeping a little, and then you start thinking, this is a problem and a threat, and I have to solve this, I have to fix this, and then you have a lot of trouble sleeping. So that's kind of number one. It's not COVID that's causing insomnia, it's kind of the reaction, the emotional reaction to the stress around it and all that. And number two is, will sleep restriction work for me? I personally think that it doesn't really work in the way it's portrayed. It doesn't work for anyone. You know, it seems very attractive, because if you think like, okay, if I just spend no more than 5 hours in bed, I'm going to be super sleepy at night, I'm going to make sleep happen, and then when I'm sleeping, I can sleep a little bit more gradually. That in itself doesn't work, because when you kind of force yourself to stay awake so you can sleep, you're going to be more anxious, more obsessed, more preoccupied, and you're going to have trouble sleeping. Even if it seems to work like it did for Katie for a while, then the fear is still going to be there. Now, if you do the same thing, almost like you say, I'm going to get up at 6 every day, and I'm going to stop checking the time at 10:30 at night, then you can teach the brain that it doesn't have to chase sleep. The intent is completely different. The intent is, I'm going to back away from trying to get sleep by having this, what I call a timeless sleep window, setting some time at night where you don't check the time, and move away from the struggle. And that can be really helpful, but not at all as helpful as just education. Fully understanding what insomnia is and what the mind has been doing, etc. That helps. No kind of technique or trick will really lead towards freedom. Okay, so let's see. We have Anon here saying, "Hi Daniel, I want to know if this is common. When I close my eyes, I get a racing mind of strange, random thoughts, not worries, but useless thoughts that don't make sense and too quick to even make sense of. This happens in the day when I'm so tired, I just close my eyes, and all of the night and all through the night, I don't perceive any sleep. So I feel like my mind has been racing all night. Now, if they were worrying thoughts, then at least I can use CBT techniques, but these are uncontrollable, stupid, useless thoughts that don't stop. No one has explained it on here. Have you come across people with this that stops them sleeping who get better? Google says it's bipolar episode, but I don't have any manic episodes. Whatever that means. Here's the thing. This is actually common. It's not uncommon at all that people say, I'm not necessarily worried. It's just that's random, bombarding, like meaningless, like weird, like no context type of thoughts are just coming. And the thing is that it is, thoughts are fleeting by nature. They are random and short and fleeting by nature. But when we look at them as something we don't want, as unwanted, then they become a little bit more sticky, and we take note of them more, etc. So I think I just want to say here really that there's nothing strange or unusual about this. And it's really always the saying that the more we don't want to have thoughts, the more thoughts we're going to have. But when we move towards these are random weird thoughts, but it's okay. Maybe I'll make a point of like trying to get to know them, or like taking some note of them, or maybe writing them down, and just show the brain that I'm okay with having these thoughts. Then the brain sees no need to kind of feed you all kinds of random things. And CBT techniques. I think again, when you have like a kind of like a fleeting thought, then you can sort of use kind of CBT, like challenge it, true. But when thoughts are sticky, that can really backfire. The CBT way can really backfire. So yeah, I think we'll end there. And we'll end with a note from Katie, who says, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Anytime, Katie. So glad you tuned in. And everyone else, of course, who tuned in, who's writing comments and sending me messages, thank you so much. I'll be back here with more after the weekend. Hope you have a really nice weekend.